Recently, Good Vibes Gaming posted a terrific video exploring the question of how long Nintendo holds back finished games. It's a superb watch that I heartily recommend. There's a link in the show notes below, and it explores several examples of titles that were provably held back for months and sometimes over a year. However, with the Good Vibes Gaming video having established that holding back titles is not some myth, but something that Nintendo definitely do, the question I'm following up with is, why do they do this? Why would it make sense for a company to spend hundreds of millions of yen making a game and then sit on it? And are there particular commonalities between the types of games that get held back? I'm not going to say I've found any definitive answers where Nintendo explain their rationale point by point. They're not that kind of company, but I think we can make some significant inferences. Clearly, in some cases, we do know the answer already. Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp was delayed out of 2021, presumably for polishing, and then delayed out of April 2022, and Nintendo went down the unusual, for them, route of confirming a reason, saying that it was in light of recent world events. Understandable. On the other hand, we had the case of New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, a title that released in January of 2019, but which was clearly done long enough in advance that the executive producer was credited as Tatsumi Kimishima, who retired from Nintendo in June of 2018 and was still credited instead of incoming president Shuntaro Furukawa. Furukawa-san had been credited first on November's Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, suggesting that New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe was finalized before that game released. In this case, I think there's a very clear rationale for why Nintendo would want to hold that game, and that is as a backup for December's Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate was a huge title for them, and delaying it out of 2018 could have really hurt, but they also know the level of quality and expectation around that game, and they have such respect for Masahiro Sakurai that I don't have a single doubt that they would have pushed it if they felt that the game required an extra few weeks, or if Sakurai-san had asked for it. But 2018 was a particularly weak year for the fledgling system, understandably, as after the big push for the Switch's launch year, the cupboard was fairly bare, given that most titles on the slate had started development during the doldrum period of the late Wii U, while the company was still keen to support 3DS to the very end, as belt and braces in case the Switch didn't take off. Basically, they needed a big title for holiday 2018. Yes, they had Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Yes, they had what became the huge success of Super Mario Party. But if there was any chance that Smash might drop off that slate, they needed to have a 2D Mario game to step into the breach and shore up sales. If you look at the pattern of releases in all the quarters from January 18 to March 2019, with the singular exception of the blockbuster sales quarter October to December, the pattern is very consistent. One not AAA, but nevertheless significant title, such as Yoshi's Crafted World, Mario Tennis Aces, and the undercooked at launch Kirby Star Allies, accompanied by one or two Wii U ports, Bayonetta 1 and 2, Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, and New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, and bolstered out a little by smaller titles like the Labo series. However, the July to September quarter is barren even by 2018 standards. Square Enix's Octopath Traveler, the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 DLC Torn of the Golden Country, and the third Labo set. Now, this September window would have been a great opportunity for New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe to drop, opening the holiday season up. Instead, that game launched about as early in January as they ever release games. No other first-party Switch title has released as early as the second week of the year, and I suspect that this was to give maximum distance within their window between this game and Super Mario Maker 2, which was following in June of 2019. Sometimes, though, these game delays seem to be to hit a specific window. Kirby and the Forgotten Land seems to have been done a long time prior, but this allowed the title to release around the 30th anniversary of the franchise, surely a boon for the Kirby merchandising empire, and also gave HAL plenty of time to finish up Kirby Return to Dreamland Deluxe to round out the anniversary in February of 2023. Now, other games which clearly had long lead times include Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and Fire Emblem Engage, both of which were ready months and months ahead of time. In fact, the German ratings board rated Fire Emblem Engage in August 2021, a full 17 months before its eventual release. Now, I wonder about both of these, and let's explore each of them in turn. It's clear that Nintendo hold back games for scheduling convenience, and I suspect scheduling may have played some part with both of these titles too. Fire Emblem Engage, which is clearly a game that harks back to years gone by, was originally connected to the anniversary, and so they may have wanted it for a specific anniversary window. But of course, the 30th anniversary of Fire Emblem fell not in 2023 or even 2021, but actually in 2020. I can see that this game was probably never targeting 2020 as the year after another major Fire Emblem title might seem an odd moment for a new game. They wouldn't want to cannibalize the sales of Three Houses at that point. Reportedly, though, the developers told Japanese magazine Nintendo Dream that COVID-19 hurt those plans and caused the title to be pushed back. But it would make some sense if the game was originally scheduled for 2021 and then missed its window. After all, with the OLED in play, 2021 was a very dense year, but skipping the entirety of 2022 is more of an eyebrow raiser. Reportedly, the team went back to re-edit it to try to secure a more favourable Japanese 0 rating, 0 being their ratings board. Now, it's odd if the game was rated in Germany in 2021 and yet apparently changed enough to move ratings in Japan, but of course, not all ratings boards have the same criteria, and cultural differences between Japan and Germany may have meant that smaller changes could have lent to different ratings outcomes in the two territories. It also appears that the team were keen to do some significant polishing on the title, and the USK, the German rating board, give the term for the state of the game as proof datum, which I believe means test date, whereas the Australian board notes 2021 as the year of production. So look, there are credible reasons to hold back Fire Emblem Engage, but why for so long? There is a 6-week gap between the Nintendo Switch Sports release in April 2022 and Mario Strikers Battle League in June, which could easily have fit a Fire Emblem title, but that quarter actually already had a Fire Emblem title. Well, of sorts. Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes released in the June of 2022. So I suspect Nintendo didn't want to have two Fire Emblem titles in 1 year, let alone in 1 quarter. Therefore, from the moment that Engage lost its 2021 slot, it by definition had a year to wait, and in this sense, January 2023 was the first available slot that was completely clear of 2022. I also wonder if merchandise had a small amount to do with this decision. In April of 2023, Japanese product manufacturer Empty released a whole bunch of Fire Emblem Engage merchandise, and it's curious that Shuntaro Furukawa also responded to a question on Engage and its apparent lack of sales compared to Three Houses by specifically highlighting merchandise. His response was as follows: in order for consumers to keep their emotional attachment to game characters and other IP, it is important that we not only provide new in-game offerings, but also appeal to those consumers in areas outside of the game. And what I'm saying here is not limited to any individual title. For instance, selling character merchandise at directly owned and operated official stores and working with our partner companies to sell licensed merchandise provides opportunities for people to come in contact with Nintendo characters and Nintendo game worlds. Through these kinds of initiatives, we aim to continuously expand the number of people who have access to Nintendo IP. He could have been talking generically, but it's at least plausible that they wanted to align the Engage release with a merchandising push. I think Zelda Tears of the Kingdom's long lead time, rated in October 2022 but released in May 2023, can also be understood. Whenever it was going to be ready, Zelda needed a clear slot for hype and a good deal of time around it for publicity. If the game was rated in October, presumably it was not completed before then, and so if they wanted to schedule it for the October of 2022, or at least for late 2022, this window might have been risky because they would have had to have started their advertising long in advance, and at that point they might not have known exactly when they would finish up. I also wonder whether they intended to tie the release of Tears of the Kingdom into the Super Mario Bros. Movie. The conventional wisdom would have been to partner the Mario movie with the Mario game, but Mario games trend casual, and there were dozens of Mario titles on Switch. Even I don't own every Mario game on the system, whereas having a major franchise entry in another series around the same time was an interesting and effective way to capitalize on the hype around Nintendo. Now, you may recall that the Super Mario Bros. Movie was delayed out of the holiday window and into April, so I wonder whether at some point Zelda followed suit. It is, after all, a rather strange window to release in. May is not usually a month for gangbuster sellers, but February or March often are. So I do wonder if this is a subtle sign of a Tears of the Kingdom delay because of the Mario movie. And if this were the case, then it would have left a slot open in the January to March 2023 quarter that Fire Emblem Engage was also able to fill. It's a plausible theory. However, there is something else these games, plus other games such as Another Code Recollection, which was rated 12 months ahead of time, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, and Mario and Luigi Brothership, which were both rated 11 months in advance, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which had a 7-month lead time, all have in common, and that is the number of languages. Tears of the Kingdom was released in Japanese, traditional Chinese, Dutch, European French, German, Italian, Russian, Korean, European Spanish, and Latin American Spanish. And believe it or not, this is still a few languages less than Breath of the Wild has now acquired, with that game playable in Japanese, English, Dutch, Canadian French, European French, German, Italian, Russian, Latin American Spanish, European Spanish, traditional Chinese, simplified Chinese, and Korean, while supplementary material for Breath of the Wild has been released in modern Hebrew, Hungarian, Polish, and European Portuguese. In fact, it does make me wonder whether one of the reasons that they continue to push Breath of the Wild over Tears of the Kingdom is simply that at this point, the saturation of the market is such that they are particularly pushing it into other regions and other languages, and Breath of the Wild is simply ready for those territories in a way that Tears of the Kingdom still isn't because of the breadth of translation options for Breath of the Wild. Meanwhile, Fire Emblem Engage has 10 language options: English US, English Europe Australia, French, Spanish Latin American, Spanish Europe, German, Italian, Japanese, traditional Chinese, and Portuguese from Brazil. That's a lot of languages, and of course, while the core content of a game might well be fixed, and presumably these rating boards only review the games in these specific languages for their region, other languages still would need a lot of configuration, not just for accuracy, but for technical reasons, such as ensuring that the amount of space the characters require is available on the screen, something particularly crucial when translating Japanese, where kanji characters can require many characters to render in other languages. I can't say for sure, but it strikes me that the translation requirements on these games is only ramping up as Nintendo is finding success and therefore looking to expand into other markets. It seems perfectly believable to me that they would submit the game to Germany for the German ratings board while still continuing with other translations in Italian, Korean, or whatever else. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that while Nintendo does hold on to games, I think rumours of some secret Scrooge McDuck-style money bin, but for games where Shuntaro Furukawa goes swimming through copies of all the new games they're not releasing, is overstated. Sure, sometimes games fall off the slate, and because of crashes or tweaks, it's hard to get them back on again. And it's not like there have never been games that they've held onto for ages, Star Fox 2 being the obvious case in point, which was scrapped very late in development so its ideas could be cannibalized for the N64 Star Fox, and yet it was able to be released pretty much complete on the SNES Mini. But I think there is at least a logic in these delayed releases. It's conceivable, of course, that there could be rainy day games ready to go as well. Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Metroid Prime 2 and Metroid Prime 3 are often given as examples of these. Is there any reason to think that these could have been cut and yet still be waiting for that mystical rainy day? I can make a highly theoretical case for Wind Waker, in fact. Nintendo have followed a Zelda game per year strategy for a long time and claimed this was their aim, but 2022 was notably Zelda-less. If Zelda Tears of the Kingdom was originally slated for 2022, as they indicated with their E3 announcement, by the time the delay was fully confirmed, Nintendo might not have wanted a different game slipping into Tears of the Kingdom's hype cycle. It would just have been a release that was too close. And of course, they wouldn't have wanted a 2023 game, as their 2023 Zelda game was Tears of the Kingdom itself. But Wind Waker could have been prepped for 2023 and then bumped first by Tears of the Kingdom and then by Echoes of Wisdom. In this case, it seems plausible that this and perhaps Twilight Princess 2 could indeed be sat on by Nintendo for an extremely long period, and that when we finally see them, we will find out that they were approved by ratings boards possibly as early as 2021. As for Metroid Primes 2 and 3, again, these games are very much secondary considerations to the effective, massive launch of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, and so I could well see such titles being held for strategic reasons. And indeed, while this seems to be the exception, not the rule, I reckon we could well see more such games that have been wrapped a long time in the early days of Switch 2, if they have indeed wanted to make sure that they have a very dense lineup of games to launch the system, and so have delayed the announcement of the Switch 2 in order to build up a really strong first year, something that was particularly effective in helping to launch the Switch compared to previous, less successful Nintendo systems. The thing is, while from the outside these behaviours may seem strange from Nintendo, I think it's possible to discern logical reasons for why they might sit on some games even for long periods, and we should bear this in mind when rumour mongers bring up the possibility that Nintendo may have games ready to shower on us at a moment's notice. But there is perhaps one final possibility, that Nintendo is transitioning its development efforts to the successor console, and so they stockpiled original Switch games ahead of time. I'm sure this hasn't happened with everything, of course, but it would make sense to create a buffer so that any problems in transitioning to the new hardware for their development staff could be ironed out without any actual delay in production. All of which means it will be very interesting to see when the Switch successor games start coming out, how long they have been in development. I strongly suspect, 70%, that we'll discover at least one Switch successor game is complete right now, even as this video is being posted. Thank you for watching and engaging. Do check out these videos on screen and interact with the content, and I shall see you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.